The rain started just after midnight. Ethan Carter tightened his jacket as the rusty pickup truck crawled along the narrow mountain road. Thick fog wrapped around the towering trees of the Appalachian Mountains like pale, ghostly fingers. His GPS had stopped working nearly an hour ago, leaving only the weak glow of his headlights cutting through the darkness. People in the nearby town had warned him not to drive into the mountains after sunset. They spoke in low voices about missing hikers, strange lights in the forest, and whispers that came from nowhere. Ethan had laughed it off. He was a documentary filmmaker from Chicago, not someone who believed in campfire stories. But now, surrounded by endless woods and silence, those warnings felt different. The truck suddenly jerked and died. The engine gave one final cough before everything went silent. Ethan stared through the windshield. No signal, no houses, no sound except rain hitting the roof. Then he noticed it. Far between the trees, deep in the fog, a single orange light flickered. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and stepped outside. Cold mountain air hit him immediately. The forest smelled of wet wood and earth. Every branch seemed to move even though there was almost no wind. The orange light remained steady in the distance. He followed it carefully, boots sinking into mud. The deeper he walked into the forest, the quieter the world became. Even the insects had stopped making noise. After nearly 10 minutes, Ethan reached a clearing. An old wooden cabin stood there. The structure looked abandoned decades ago. Moss covered the roof. The windows were cracked. Yet warm orange light glowed from inside, as if someone were waiting for him. Ethan hesitated. Then the cabin door slowly creaked open by itself inside. The cabin smelled like dust and old smoke. A fireplace crackled softly, even though no one was there. On the walls hung faded black and white photographs of families Ethan had never seen before. Some photos were so old that the faces had nearly disappeared. Then Ethan noticed something disturbing. Every single photograph showed the same mountain in the background, the same mountain he had passed earlier. He moved closer to one of the pictures and froze. A tall, shadowy figure stood far behind the family in the photo, barely visible among the trees. At first, Ethan thought it was damage on the picture, but the figure appeared in every photograph. Watching, waiting, Ethan suddenly heard footsteps above him. Slow, heavy, deliberate. There was someone upstairs. Ethan swallowed hard and aimed the flashlight toward the staircase. The footsteps stopped. For several seconds, the cabin became completely silent. Then came 3 slow knocks from above. Knock, knock, knock. Ethan's heart pounded. Every instinct told him to run back to the truck, but curiosity pushed him forward. He climbed the stairs carefully, each wooden step groaning beneath his weight. At the end of the hallway sat a single closed door. The knocks came again. From inside, Ethan slowly reached for the handle. The door opened into a tiny bedroom filled with old newspapers, candles, and strange symbols carved into the wooden floor. In the center of the room sat an ancient radio. The radio crackled loudly by itself. A distorted voice whispered through static. "Don't let it see you." Ethan stepped backward instantly. The radio continued hissing. Then another voice came through. This one sounded terrified. "Leave before sunrise." Suddenly, the radio went silent. A deep sound echoed outside the cabin. Not thunder, something else. A horn, long and low, coming from somewhere deep in the mountains. Ethan rushed downstairs and looked through the window. The fog outside had thickened completely. Then shapes began moving between the trees. Tall figures, too tall to be human. They moved slowly, almost unnaturally, circling the cabin without making a sound. Ethan's breathing became shallow. He locked the cabin door, even though he knew it probably wouldn't help. The horn echoed again, closer this time. The windows rattled violently. And then all at once, the figures stopped moving. Every shadow in the forest turned toward the cabin. Toward him. Ethan backed away from the window. His flashlight flickered rapidly. Then the power inside the cabin died. Darkness swallowed everything. Only moonlight seeped through the broken windows. Outside, slow footsteps circled the cabin. Wood creaked beneath enormous weight. Ethan hid behind an old table, trying not to breathe too loudly. His mind raced through every warning the townspeople had given him earlier that day. One old man at the gas station had grabbed Ethan's arm before he left town. "You hear the horn," the man whispered. "You don't look outside." At the time, Ethan thought the man was crazy. Now he understood the fear in his eyes. The footsteps stopped directly outside the front door. Silence. Then came a slow, scratching sound against the wood. The scratching continued for almost a minute. Then it suddenly stopped. Ethan stayed frozen. A few seconds later, a child's voice spoke softly from outside the door. "Please help me." Ethan's stomach tightened. The voice sounded completely normal. Too normal. "Please," the child whispered again. "I'm lost." Ethan slowly moved toward the window, despite the warning. He carefully peeked through a crack in the wood. A little girl stood outside in the fog, wearing an old white dress. Her head tilted slightly downward. She wasn't moving. Rain poured around her, yet her clothes remained perfectly dry. Then she slowly lifted her face. Her eyes were completely black. The horn blasted again across the mountains. The girl smiled. Ethan stumbled backward in terror. The cabin door suddenly shook violently. Bang, bang, bang. The entire structure groaned as something massive pushed against it from outside. Dust rained from the ceiling. Ethan grabbed an old hunting rifle hanging above the fireplace, though he had no idea if it worked. The banging stopped. Silence returned once more. Then the radio upstairs turned on again by itself. Static filled the cabin. A whisper crawled through the speakers. "It's inside now." Ethan spun around instantly. The front door remained closed. But upstairs, footsteps had returned. Slow, heavy, descending the staircase. Ethan raised the rifle with trembling hands. The footsteps came closer, one step at a time. The air inside the cabin suddenly became freezing cold. His breath appeared in pale clouds before his face. A tall shadow emerged at the top of the staircase. It was impossibly thin. Its arms stretched far too long, but Ethan could never clearly see its face. Darkness covered it unnaturally, as if the creature absorbed light itself. The shadow stopped halfway down the stairs. Neither moved. Then Ethan noticed something horrifying behind the creature. Dozens of shadowy figures now stood silently outside every window of the cabin, watching. The horn sounded one final time, and every light in the forest disappeared at once. Ethan fired the rifle. The blast echoed through the mountains. The creature vanished instantly into darkness. For several seconds, nothing moved. Then the cabin began shaking violently. Windows shattered. Cold wind exploded through the rooms. The shadowy figures outside rushed toward the cabin all at once, their shapes twisting unnaturally in the fog. Ethan ran. He crashed through the back door and sprinted into the forest without looking back. Branches tore at his jacket as he stumbled downhill through mud and rain. Behind him came the sound of hundreds of footsteps moving through the trees, following him. Hours later, Ethan finally reached the road just before sunrise. His truck was still there. The moment sunlight touched the mountains, the forest became silent again. No footsteps, no horn, nothing. Ethan drove straight out of the mountains without stopping once. When he reached the nearby town, he told the sheriff everything. The old sheriff listened quietly before leading Ethan to a locked room inside the station. On the wall hung dozens of missing person photographs collected over the last 50 years. Tourists, hikers, travelers, all vanished somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. Then Ethan noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the background of one missing person photo stood the same tall, shadowy figure from the cabin pictures, watching from the trees. The sheriff slowly closed the folder. "You're lucky," he whispered. "Most people who hear the horn never come back." Ethan left town that morning and never returned to the Appalachian Mountains. But years later, while editing old footage from his broken camera, he discovered something hidden in one frame recorded outside the cabin that night. Far behind him, standing among the trees, was himself, perfectly still, watching. The horn kept echoing again and again across the mountains. Hours later, Ethan finally reached the road just before sunrise. His truck was still there. The moment sunlight touched the mountains, the forest became silent again. No footsteps, no horn, nothing. Ethan drove straight out of the mountains without stopping once. When he reached the nearby town, he told the sheriff everything. The old sheriff listened quietly before leading Ethan to a locked room inside the station. On the wall hung dozens of missing person photographs collected over the last 50 years. Tourists, hikers, travelers, all vanished somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains. Then Ethan noticed something that made his blood run cold. In the background of one missing person photo stood the same tall, shadowy figure from the cabin pictures, watching from the trees. The sheriff slowly closed the folder. "You're lucky," he whispered. "Most people who hear the horn never come back." Ethan left town that morning and never returned to the Appalachian Mountains. But years later, while editing old footage from his broken camera, he discovered something hidden in one frame recorded outside the cabin that night. Far behind him, standing among the trees, was himself, perfectly still, watching.